In my restless dreams, I see that town. Silent Hill.
Welcome back. In today's video, we'll be doing an in-depth polygel tutorial for this summer-inspired set that I did for the World Cup. These are Brazil-inspired nails. We'll be going through prep, application, shaping, and nail art, so I hope you enjoy. And as always, I'll be using products from my brand today, DTYN, our polygels, gel polishes, and art gels. We have a variety of products that you can shop on our storefront at doperthanyournails.com. Link is in the description, and we do ship worldwide. So we're starting off with our nail prep. Nail prep is very important. I emphasize this in every video, so I always start off with a cuticle pusher, and I make sure to be very thorough with this, get into those corners. I do a few things for my nail prep, but this is always the first step. Nail prep is not just about the aesthetics. If we don't do this step, all of that cuticle and everything that's grown out, if we leave that on the nail plate, the nail products really won't adhere that well and our retention won't be so great. This step looks a little messy and you're probably like, what's going on here? I'm actually using baby powder with a brush and just applying that over the nails and the cuticle. What it does is it just helps absorb any excess oils and dry everything up. Makes it really seamless to use a cuticle bit like I'm doing here with my e-file to further clean everything up, and then it also makes it easy to clip off the skin with cuticle nippers if you do want to do that step. I just keep it pretty minimal. I just clean up the skin that's lifting off. This part should not be causing any pain or anything like that, so use your discretion if this is a step that you want to do. Overall, I'm a huge fan of using the baby powder. I feel like it's been really nice to incorporate, and I definitely will be continuing to do so. And then I like to finish off with a 240 grit sanding band. So this is a very fine grit sanding band, and you can use it against your file just to season it, just so you don't have any sharp edges. And then I just use it over the entire nail plate at a low speed of about 4 to 5 RPM. This is the last step that I do as far as cleaning up everything for our nail prep. It removes any remaining cuticle on the nail plate. It helps remove the shine as well, so that we have a better retention. But we're keeping this step pretty minimal. I'm not sitting there and going over the same spot on my nails over and over with the nail file. I'm just moving my file continuously and going over it like once or twice. I use polygel as an acrylic alternative. I apply them over half cover tips. I size them out, make sure they fit sidewall to sidewall. Then I use a brush on glue to glue it onto the nails. To make sure it looks straight, I just bring it down straight from the knuckles. So if your fingers are a little crooked or going one way or the other, this will help ensure that. The tip might look crooked when you apply it, but with this, once you apply the product, it looks straight. I just like to apply pressure for about 7 to 10 seconds, and then I also like to hold down from the sides and apply pressure just so it's secure all around. I do like to use a brush on glue for this. I use Young Nails brush on glue. It's the one glue that I've stuck with pretty much over the years, and it works really well. The brush on glue is easy to use with the applicator as well. It's easier than using the ones that you squeeze out of a tube. This is a step where a lot of people might be experiencing problems when you're gluing on your tips. If you're using too much glue, it can cause the nail tip to come off. If you're not using enough, it won't be secure enough, so you have to find that balance. Making sure your nail tips actually fit your nail, making sure that they are not too big or small. If they are too small, I think they are more prone to popping off just because there's just a lot of pressure there, so they should fit comfortably from sidewall to sidewall without having to press down too much. On the other hand, if your nail tips are too big, they can easily pop off as well. But if you are in between sizes, it is better to size up and then file down, which is what I did here with the pinky. When using the smallest size in this box of tips, it was still too big, so I ended up clipping the sides down just a little bit with scissors, and then I'm just going to file it to fit, which I will show in a little bit after I use my sanding band. So I just use that same 240 grit sanding band, and I just lightly go over the entire nail tip, and then I also like to blend it with the natural nail. With this step, we are keeping our file on the nail tip itself. We are not filing on the natural nail. I'm showing here, don't file on that part, just file on the plastic nail tip, otherwise you might end up over filing and damaging your nails. You just want to make sure there's a nice seamless transition from the natural nail to the nail tip. This just again helps ensure that your application looks clean, your shaping looks clean, and you actually have a nice shape and structure with your nails. And they will hold up better. You won't have any awkward ridges or edges sticking out, which really helps as well, especially when you are doing longer nails. And even with this step, you just want to go over the nail tip once, make sure that everything is buffed out and filed, but we don't want to over file in any spot, because at the end of the day, we are filing on a plastic nail tip. It's not strong. at this point, obviously it's strong enough to be sitting there and glued on, but if you overfile it, you're just weakening the nail tip as well. So another thing to be mindful of. I get so many questions about polygel and questions about, you know, people are struggling with retention or specific things. They can't figure out what it is, especially on TikTok, and I try to answer as many as I can. Obviously it's a little bit more limited what I can say there in a comment or show in a video just because it's short format content, right? But I always try to point to like specific things like prep, application, and shaping. But really, when I'm putting together these long format YouTube videos, I'm really trying to emphasize that it's all of the little details that come together that make a good set that is going to last with good retention and look the way that you want it to. It's not meant to overwhelm you, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is the small details do make a difference. For example, if you're overfiling your nail tips, you might not realize it, but that might be a reason they're popping off prematurely. There's just so many different factors that could be causing your nails to pop off that sometimes me just saying check your prep probably is not going to be as helpful, which is why I try to direct people even like from TikTok and Instagram to watch my YouTube videos, because that is where I can explain in more detail. So back to this tutorial, what I'm doing here is just reshaping the nail tips. As you can see, they are a rounded, not necessarily a crisp stiletto. So what I'm doing here is just making them more narrow and making the free edge more sharp. And this helps because, as you can see, there is a little bit of rounding coming out at that nail tip. And I think just in general with pre-shaped tips, they do need to be reshaped. Even though when I bought these nail tips, they are labeled as stiletto nail tips. To me, this is not like a true stiletto, but it's funny because at the end I made them too sharp, so you'll see that I ended up rounding them out, but we'll get to that point eventually. But this part is definitely more so focused on aesthetics. You just want to make sure that your nail tip is filed to the shape that you want it to be before you do your application. But this step can be a little precarious, maybe is the right word if you're a beginner, because there is a little bit of filing that you have to do. So like I'm showing here when I tilt my file, is just that you want to make sure you are not filing into that sidewall. You want to make sure you're keeping your file parallel. At this point especially, you don't want to file into the sidewalls. You don't want to create notches or edges. Not only is it not going to turn out the way you want aesthetically, it compromises the integrity of the plastic nail tip, which, as I mentioned, is already not in a strong state because we haven't applied any product, we haven't applied any base coat. But I'm just taking a 100 over 180 grit hand file and I'm just going nail by nail and making the sides more narrow, just making sure that free edge is more crisp and a true stiletto. When I posted my last poll, a lot of people voted for shaping as what they would like me to address more in my nail tutorial I would post next, and I do address shaping a lot, but I wanted to slow down this part a lot more to show because if you are using half cover tips, the shaping might start even before you do your application, and this is a great example. So I'm just keeping my file parallel. I'm making sure to make sure that file is not curving or hooking under the nail, just filing against that sidewall until it is nice and straight. And with stiletto, you want to keep your file moving from side to side. It's very easy to overfile one side more than the other. Imagine a straight line down the center. A stiletto is basically a triangle shape at the free edge of your nail, so you want the sides to come down straight from the corners of where your nail tip are to pretty much a straight, crisp point. So I always file one side a little bit, I'll go back and file the other and keep comparing, just because like I said, if you file one side more, there's nothing you can do to fix it, unfortunately, and you'll have a lopsided stiletto, which nobody wants. Starting off with alcohol and dehydrating with these little swab sticks, whatever they're called, until I buy Young Nails Swipe again. I don't know why I haven't ordered it, honestly. Once that dries, I'm applying my primer, which is Young Nails Protein Bond, to the natural nail. I like to start at the bottom and work my way up. This is just the steps that you do to, again, build that structure for your products to last. So primer acts as an anchor for your products to stick to as well. Once that air dries, I am applying my gel base coat. Gel base coat is a very important step for polygel, since polygel is technically a gel system. So I'm applying gel base coat to the entire nail. This is actually our clear rubber base, which is finally releasing on July 31st, so you can mark your dates. We have new polygel shades releasing alongside that, so there will be more on that soon, along with, of course, an in-depth video showing the new collection. I mentioned gel base coat. Clear rubber base can be considered a type of gel base coat, meaning you can use it as a gel base coat, but it is more versatile than that because you can also use it to do overlays and structured manicures. It's a little bit thicker, and I find the retention is a little better, and I've just really enjoyed using it under my polygel sets. I know there are acrylic techs that use it under their sets as well. You can even use it to apply like clear gel extensions, add reinforcement to your press-on. So all that being said, you can use a regular gel base coat. I'm using a clear rubber base, which works works just fine as well, but you can use either. So I apply it to both the natural nail and the nail tip. I know some people just do it to the natural nail, but what I would say is if you are struggling with retention, apply it to the whole nail tip and see if that helps. I've just always done it this way and I don't mind using the extra product. So you've applied it, just make sure you fully cure in your lamp and don't remove the sticky layer. I just have my lamp off camera. Here are the polygels we are choosing from today. These are from my brand. These are our neutral polygels. You can consider them our core 4, and I'm going to be using Desert Rose. Everyone loves Wispy Peach. I love Wispy Peach too, but I also really love Desert Rose, and it's also one of my go-to neutral colors. It's a dusty rose color, but it still has a little bit of that peach undertone. During the summertime, I do recommend putting your polygel tubes into the fridge for a couple of minutes before you use them, just because polygel is temperature dependent. This will bring it back to that optimal consistency, so it's similar to acrylic. It depends on the temperature of your workspace. I'm getting my slip solution ready. I just use 70% isopropyl alcohol. This is what's compatible with our polygel, and I'm also using the polygel brush from my brand. Everything is linked in the description. You can shop it there. You just want to have some sort of lint-free wipe or paper towel ready to drain your brush. You never really want to use your brush just dipped straight into the liquid. That's just too much liquid and it'll oversaturate everything. You want to drain out a little bit before you use the liquid to mold your polygel. And I also like to store my tube upright to prevent air bubbles. I'll be using the 2-bead method, but use as many beads as you find helpful. I just think that multiple beads is helpful as a beginner. You can build up the structure gradually, especially for longer nails. So I placed that first bead where the natural nail meets the nail tip, and polygel pretty much combines a combination of a padding and dragging motion. Once you have patted the product into place to your liking, you can start to drag it down. I keep my first bead pretty thin just because I have found that if you place too much product, it can become quite bulky. So I try to save the bulk of that for the second bead because that is when I am building the apex. So I do fully cure that first layer off camera, and like I said, don't worry about it looking not as opaque because, as I said, I like to save the bulk of that product for the second bead and just use it when I'm building the apex and cuticle area, just so that the nail doesn't turn out too bulky. The second bead I place below the cuticle area, and I'm working it towards the cuticle, just tucking it into there using the edges of my brush. I'm using more of a tilting motion side to side. As I build the apex to my liking, I'll continue to drag it down so that the apex and cuticle area is to my liking as well. We also don't want that to be overly bulky. We want to make everything as smooth as possible. And then I just drag the rest of the product down to the free edge. An extra layer is basically going over the free edge, and then we clean up the sides and make sure there's no product under there to the best of our ability. Our polygel is very buttery, so I feel like it's pretty easy to smooth out, especially with a larger brush like the one that we have on our website. It covers a larger surface area. It just makes it easier to make everything smooth. So moving on to the next nail, I've placed down that first bead, and I start with a padding motion, as you can see, first to really place it into the area that I want, and then I will start dragging it from there. But even when you're dragging, you want to work on top of the product. You don't want to overly overwork the product, or else you'll just remove everything that you've placed down. So again, I am keeping that first bead pretty thin and then focusing the structure mostly on the second bead. So here I am, second bead is placed down, first layer is already cured. We're starting to pat it into place. And the great thing about polygel, you can work in any which way that you would like, meaning here you see that I have placed it below the cuticle area, but I'm actually not worrying about doing the cuticle bead first. I'm actually working a little bit of that product down, seeing how the apex is looking, seeing how the product is looking when it's a little bit further down the nail. Then I go back and I work on the cuticle bead and the apex area, and I can even swipe my brush backwards to refine that area or bring more product back up if I want to. Polygel doesn't dry until you put it into the lamp, so it makes it a very beginner friendly and versatile product in that way, and you can work with it in whatever way feels most comfortable for you. So all that to say, even I don't approach application the same every time for each nail. Sometimes I'm just going with the flow too, especially since I'm filming. So you can see with the pointer finger, that was definitely the case, but the application still turns out fine at the end. One thing I do try to keep consistent is my bead placement for that first bead. So you can see I place the product out of the tube at the center, and then I start patting it down. It creates like a little bit of a flat circle, and then I drag it down from there, and then I just remove any excess product. Same thing with that second bead. We've got the product placed here at the center, and then we focus on just patting in place with light tapping motions. And you can see even with that feathering motion that I'm doing here, I'm not using a ton of pressure because I want most of the product to stay in that apex area towards the top. I'm just bringing it down lightly over the free edge, and then I'm just tucking it into the cuticle area, tilting my brush side to side as needed, going and looking at different angles to clean up whatever may need to be cleaned up. I think it's always better to use less versus more polygel. You can always go back and add more. Sometimes you need to add like a mini bead or a small layer. That's totally fine. I think it's easier to add more more versus having to file away a bunch if you do add too much. This clip here definitely shows that circular shape a little bit better that I'm aiming for when I am placing down my bead, and I would recommend trying to do something like that, whether you are doing 1 bead, 2 bead, or multiple beads. It will just make it really easy to tap your brush along the edges, tap around a little bit at the center, and then just drag the rest down and have a really easy time doing your application. It just sets it up really nicely. If your product is kind of like all over the place, or you place it kind of in a weird way, I think it can make it a little bit harder. Though the nice thing about polygel is definitely that it's not cured until you put it into the lamp, so you can definitely move it back with your brush if you needed to. I just think that for like especially a quick and efficient application, the bead placement definitely makes a difference, so you can try focusing on that and practicing that as well if you're looking to like speed up your timing. You'll see that even when I have the application pretty much placed and both beads are set, I will go back with my brush very lightly around key areas like near the cuticle area or around the sides, just to smooth it out or bring down any product just a little bit more if I can. But I am using very, very light pressure at this point. Like I said, most of the application is set, so I don't want to move around key areas or totally remove the apex, so it's very light, but at the edge I might apply a little bit more pressure just to remove that excess product, just so it's not hanging there. You'll see there's a little bit there at the edge. Definitely more common with stiletto when you have like a sharp point like that, but that'll be super easy to file away those small parts once we get to shaping. And we're finishing off with the pinky here. Some do find that the application can be a little bit more difficult just because it is a smaller nail. You could try using a smaller brush like our art gel brush. However, I think over time you can definitely get comfortable with the bigger brush. You just need to tilt it a little bit more side to side. But for the most part, even though the pinky is smaller, I still find the bigger brush really helpful for the bulk of the surface of the nail. The process for application is exactly the same. We just do our 2 beads. The shaping on the pinky will have to be a little bit more in depth just because, like I said, I had to cut the nail tip on the sides, and it still looks a little awkward on the sides just because the smallest nail tip wasn't the right size for me, so we'll deal with that once we get to shaping. Then I just go ahead and cure the nails, and I always clean out my brush at the end. I highly recommend doing this even if you are using like nail art brushes, whatever it may be. Clean it out in a clean dish of isopropyl alcohol just so your brush stays in good shape and there's no excess gel just sitting in the bristles over time. Next step is shaping. So I've wiped off the sticky-layer with alcohol. I'm getting my e-file manicure brush, mask, dust collector ready. I would say that my brand's polygel, the sticky layer is not too significant, so it's pretty easy to wipe away. You just want to make sure you do that before file. First step that I personally like to do is focus on cleaning up the cuticle area and the apex area, and then I like to use the same bit along the rest of the nail. At this point, I'm focusing on the surface of the nail, so you want to be careful not to let your e-file go into the sidewalls too much or really at all, or else you will ruin the structure of the nail or create a notch. We will focus on that part of the nail later. So I'm just taking that fine grit 5-in-1 bit and I'm going around the cuticle area at a pretty low speed, about 4 to 5 RPMs. I'm making sure to keep my file parallel to the nail plate, and I'm also using this to go along the apex area and just make sure everything is nice and cohesive. You want there to be a gradual transition coming from the cuticle area, and you don't want there to be any harsh ridges around the cuticle area or the apex. Those can be more prone to lifting and they don't grow out as nicely. So that's why a bit like this with the tapered shape and then the cone shape where you can use the larger surface of the bit for the rest of the nail is really nice, and I think it helps tie everything together and make it look more cohesive and not like I said, there's not any harsh ridges. And then I can also use it along the rest of the surface of the nail to remove any uneven areas and to make sure everything is smoothed out. Because this is a fine grit bit, it's not going to file away a ton of product. It's like the least coarse bit that you can use from the 5-in-1 bits that I know of. So I'm just working on shaping this next nail here, and I like to use this side to side motion as well down the entirety of the nail, and this is the structure that I'm aiming for. So as you can see, there's a gradual transition from the apex down to the free edge. You will see me use the nail bit down the length of the nail versus side to side, but for the most part I try to focus on this side to side motion here because it more naturally, in my opinion, mimics like the curvature of the nail that you're going for. But I will go this way, as you see, down the sides of the nail, but it's definitely not as extensive. You can also use this bit to clean under the nail, but you have to be really careful not to get into those side walls. So if you're not comfortable doing this, you can also do this with your hand file, which I will show you in a little bit once we finish up with our e-file. You can also feel free to follow whatever shaping routine works for you. A lot of people don't touch the cuticle area until like the very last step. I like to do that first just so I can see more or less where I I need to clean up. Overfiling is something that I really struggled with, and also I feel like for a long time I just followed a routine that wasn't actually looking at where I needed to file more. One of the biggest things that helped me is actually taking time to slow down and analyze the structure of the nail. For example, this part here is where a lot of people tend to overfile or their application gets really unbalanced, and if that top part of the nail where the apex and cuticle area you don't apply enough product there, if you overfile it, if that transition coming down the sidewalls is not cohesive, you kind of lose the overall shape and aesthetic of the nail. From personal experience as someone that was trying to figure out what am I doing wrong here, why are my nails not looking the way that I want them to, so that's just something that I try to keep in mind when I'm shaping. It's not just filing the cuticle area and apex, it's also looking at how it balances with the free edge. Hopefully that makes sense. But that's all for the e-file for now. Now we are moving on to hand filing, and I am going to be using a 100 over 180 grit hand file over the surface of the nail. I use the more coarse side, which is the 100 grit side. So with hand files and just files and sanding bits in general, the lower the number, the more coarse it is. So like an 80 grit hand file is very coarse. If you want something more fine, not as coarse or sharp, you want to get something in a higher number like 180, 240. So I'm using this over the surface of the nail. I do this guideline down the center, and then I file down one side towards like where that nail is curving towards, and then I do it the opposite way. So this right hand side, right hand is what you're seeing is facing you, but it's my left hand side. I'm filing towards that side of the nail. Again, this just helps mimic that natural curvature of the nail that we are trying to achieve with our structure. For the guideline down the center, don't overthink it. You just want to scuff up the center just enough to create a visual guide, just so you have like a general dividing line, so you can say, okay, I'm gonna file towards the left hand side here, and then I'm gonna file towards the right hand side here, and then it helps you avoid doing that seesaw motion, especially over the top part of the nail. That motion can be really helpful as a beginner, but over time you want to be more intentional with your shaping. So again, we're trying to achieve a certain structure. That's my goal with the nails that I'm doing here. So if I just run my file back and forth over the top of the nail, all I'm going to do is flatten out that surface, which is not the aesthetic or shape or structure that I'm going for. You'll see that I also like turn my hand depending on which side that I'm shaping, just because whatever angle is more comfortable. It's a little more awkward always like when you're doing your own nails versus like with a client, you're facing someone like head on. But whatever angle or way you need to turn your hands and fingers to shape it in whatever way is most comfortable for you, I would say go for it. Like here, you'll see that when I do the right hand side, it's easier for me to turn my hand and use my file this way. Sometimes I'll go back and forth. Definitely this is like the most labor intensive part and the part that can feel like most strenuous on your hands, so just be mindful of like not being super tense, not using more pressure than you need to. For the pinky especially, I have to brace my fingers even more so, just because it just I feel the pressure a lot more on the pinky. I think a lot of people experience that, so you can hold your finger whatever way feels most comfortable. We'll focus on the actual side walls of the nail, against the sides and under the nail as well, but for this I will be using a more coarse file, the 80 grit hand file that I mentioned earlier. It's just really good for getting that actual crispy shape. So starting under the sidewalls, you want to file parallel to under the sidewalls. You want to be careful not to tilt your file too high or at too much of an angle, especially when you get close to where the natural nail is underneath. So I gradually work my way up, and when you get to the very tip of the nail, you can run it right under there along both sides, but for certain nail shapes you can't do that like square, just because it will kind of round it out a little bit, if that makes sense, from underneath the nail. But for the most part, I am focusing on one side than the other, and you will start to see excess product come off. So this is another way you can remove excess product, like what I was referring to earlier with the 5-in-1 bit. This is a way that you can do that with the hand file. Then we will file against the side walls, so the actual sides of the nails that are forming that stiletto shape. This just makes sure that they are nice and crispy, that they have that clean edge, and that we have the perfect stiletto shape. So if there's any uneven areas or there's just certain areas where it's not coming down in a straight line, this just helps fix that. Hand filing is where the magic really comes together. You can see that we are starting to see that crisp stiletto shape both under and above the nail. Shaping is not just about the parts that you can see on top of the nail. It is definitely about making sure these sidewalls are also clean and look refined. That also contributes to a balanced and aesthetically looking nail. So that's why you see me here focusing on filing under the sidewalls for all the nails. But even when I am filing one side here, like I'm doing with the right side, I am tilting my file ever so slightly, just so I'm not using a seesaw motion underneath the nail as well, just because with stiletto it is so easy to accidentally file into the sidewalls and accidentally mess up that shape, and if you do, there's unfortunately not much you can do to fix it. It's just a little bit more of a fragile structure in that way, so that's why I try to be careful under the sidewalls. Even even when I'm filing against the sidewalls, I try to move my file back and forth, file one side, move to the other, just so I don't over file one side more than the other. Filing under the nail, I know I already said it earlier, but just to emphasize again, it was one of the biggest things I learned as a beginner, just because sometimes there is bulk that we think we're seeing on top of the nail. We're trying to figure out, what do I need to file here to make it look more clean, and oftentimes it's just under the nail that needs to be cleaned up. I truly love hand filing and shaping in general. It is my favorite part of doing polygel nails. I love doing nail art as well. I get to do that even when I'm not doing polygel nails, just like press-on nails or gel nails in general, but truly shaping is an art form in itself, and I think it can be really fun when you get used to it. Just showing here, like we did when we glued on our tips, we are focusing on that half triangle shape coming down from the free edge, just making sure those lines are coming down in a cohesive way and connecting in a cohesive way, that the lines and everything is even on both sides. The pinky definitely needed the most refinement on the sidewalls and just shaping in general, just because I used that larger nail tip from earlier. Getting to the end of our shaping, all we have to do now is buff and smooth everything out for an ultra polished finish so we can do our nail art over it. So the easiest way is with a 240 grit sanding band. This is the same thing we used when we prepped our natural nails, when we blended our nail tips. I'm just using this over the surface of the nail at a pretty low speed. I'm being mindful to go in this side to side motion here, just because I want to follow that natural curvature of the nail. I'm not looking to remove any product or do any actual shaping here. I am just looking to smooth everything out that we've already shaped. You can use it to clean up around the cuticle area if you like as well. This is the easiest way to buff, just because you're using an e-file, you have more control over it, but you can use an actual buffer as well, or if you want that ultra polished finish, I actually do both. I get so many questions on how do you make your polygel or even acrylic smooth, how do you get a very smooth surface for nail art, and this is the way that I do it. So the cuticle oil definitely helps remove any scratches, just really smooth everything out so it has like that polish. You could also use matte top coat before you do any nail art, but this is another way that you can do that and make sure everything is really smooth without any scratches. After that, I do wash my hands off camera, and then I also cleanse with alcohol. I don't have any issues with retention or anything, even with the cuticle oil, as long as you cleanse properly. Now it's time for nail art. I am doing Brazil World Cup inspired polygel nails. This was filmed weeks ago when the tournament started. I don't think any of us expected Brazil to be eliminated so quickly, but nonetheless, I think this is a fun summer set. I'm using Potion Garden, which is a muted sage green gel polish color from my brand. This color and the solid colors that we have are just so good and easy to use, especially for a full coverage French tip like this. They self-level so nicely, so it's easy to draw a French tip that isn't going to turn out bulky or streaky. I'm just wiping under the nail just to make sure there's no excess polish under there, and then curing. Next, I'm going to layer Frozen Meadows over that, which is a really fun neon green with a shimmer in it. I figured it would be perfect for the Brazil theme that we're doing. Obviously, we're going to be using a lot of different greens and yellows and oranges. I feel like I'm definitely in my neon era, so this was perfect to use. I'm using a very thin layer of this, and it paired so nicely over the sage green. It just muted it down a little bit, but it still is very vibrant. This is from our winter collection, but honestly, I use this color all year round, and it's obviously very perfect for summer given how bright it is. I knew I wanted to do a sort of star design on the thumb along with the horizontal French tip and the green shimmery base, of course. Part is optional, but if you are doing intricate nail art, this is not necessarily the most intricate. We're just going to be doing a few stars. You can add a top coat or matte top coat before doing that, and it will create an even more smooth base for you to paint over. Now I am outlining the stars in white just because it's easier for me to outline with. This is not necessary either, but sometimes when you're painting with a certain color over it, this just makes it more vibrant and pop even more, and then you don't have to do a second layer of the other color that you need to use, which will be yellow in this case. This is a technique I've used from time to time, and I like to retest it out, and I'll be using it a lot throughout this set, and sometimes it is just easier to outline and do everything with a different color like white or black. I did make the larger star just slightly overlap with the French tip, which I think adds a nice touch and balances it out more, and then once that's cured, I'm taking a yellow gel polish and just painting over the star, and the white base really helped. Yellow is obviously a very vibrant color, but sometimes it can look a little streaky or not as opaque or need like 2 layers. So this helped make sure that I didn't have to do more than 1 layer. It really helped the yellow look as vibrant as possible, and everything turned out nice and smooth, no streakiness. And of course, I have to add some shading and more dimension to the stars, so I'm taking our Art Glass in Golden Hour, one of my go-to colors for shading and just one of my favorite jelly colors. It's like a syrupy orangish yellow, and I just realized because I have my nails done long on both hands, the nails on the right hand might be blocking the view at times, so please just disregard that. I think you still get the point, and the tutorial still showing what it needs to show. And to finish off, I'm adding a neon neon yellow around the edges, just around the edges only. I'm not bringing it into the center too much. The base yellow color, the golden hour art glass gel, and then this neon yellow are going to be my go-to color combos for this set that I'll be repeating, and these swap sticks are really nice for cleaning up any excess polish that we don't need. And then I'm just adding my top coat once everything is cured. I love how simple yet fun this design is. It's something that I haven't been doing a ton lately, but it's really fun to do, especially for polygel sets. Just try out different designs and placements, and then of course I have to do a final file after just to make sure any bulk is removed that was added from the gel polish, though there really wasn't a ton. I was definitely already obsessed with the thumb alone before even doing the rest of this set, and then I'm also using our top coat, which we'll be releasing later this year, which is very exciting. With our theme here, we are doing a yellow French tip. I actually really like the horizontal, like straight line French tips. I'm definitely going to be doing that more, and I've been seeing a lot of nail sets with them. I did not do a white base under this yellow, so I had to do 2 layers, but I did use our art gel brush to apply it, and then once that was cured, I added our golden hour art glass jelly again over that just to warm it up and add in a little bit more of that orange tone. I say it in every video, but jellies are so underrated for nail art and just adding dimension and shading, and it's truly transformed the way that I approach my nail art. After that, I went ahead and did an aura design with some orange gel paint just to top it off. I've been really into doing the aura designs for the background. I just use a sponge. Now I'm adding a soccer ball pattern over the French tip. This is definitely more complicated with the stiletto nail shape that tapers off like this. If you wanted more of it to show and not have to worry so much about the proportions and balance, you could just do it on like a square nail tip instead. I'm outlining everything in white like I did with the stars just to make it simple when I go back and add yellow and all green and all the colors and everything. Like I mentioned, because of the nail shape, it is going to be slightly cut off at the sides. So the way that I like to think about it that helps me, especially with a nail shape like this, is I still imagine the entire pattern, but then when I get to a point where I know it's going to be cut off, I just draw part of it, but you still want the proportions and stuff to match where you are seeing the full element, if that makes sense. You don't necessarily want to actually draw it smaller in the corner. So that's why we only see like 2 of the actual parts of the pattern, like the full thing here at the center. But anyways, go ahead and cure it. I painted everything over with neon green, and then I used our verdant glaze art glass gel, another one of our jelly colors, just to add more shading and dimension. Given the theme, it's probably very fitting and a good time to share a little bit of my lore, which is that I played soccer consistently from the age of 4 to like 18, so like all throughout growing up. I started off playing rec soccer like as a young kid, obviously, and then obviously played for like my high school team growing up, played for like club teams, played like indoor soccer for fun, and traveled a ton for like tournaments. Obviously spent so much of my time, afternoons, everything like at practice. And another fun fact is, even though I'm right-handed, I am naturally left-footed, which made it an even more interesting experience. If you guys want to hear more about that, you can let me know. So after finishing off that nail, we are going to be repeating the same French tip design that we did on the thumb with Potion Garden as the base. For French tips, I always find it easier to fill in the free edge with the actual brush with the polish on it versus doing it with a liner brush. It's just much faster, and I feel like it turns out smoother. I want to do the sun design in the corner with the rays coming out as like diagonal lines with a few different inspo images that I'm using as a reference. For this design and this set overall, I'm not using any like references that I'm copying exactly. I'm just kind of mixing and matching and using general vibes and elements. Same technique I used for the stars here for the aura. Because I am going to use a neon green and yellow for the aura design, I wanted to use a white base under as an aura design as well, just something subtle, just so the color shows up more vibrantly on top of it. This definitely helped a lot, and the aura turned out very nice. I like using these larger sponges for my aura designs, and I have them linked in my Amazon storefront. I'm drawing the base of the sun at the corner here, just a simple circle that's cut off at the top where the French tip is, and then I'm just using a 20mm brush to draw these diagonal lines. Longer liner brushes might seem more intimidating as a beginner, but they're actually very helpful to use. It just makes it easy to stabilize and draw longer lines without the shakiness. Because it's such a long brush, you actually don't have to do so much, so it was really easy to draw these diagonal lines. I'm using the same color combos that I used for the stars, so I'm starting off with this simple yellow color for the base, just filling that in over the circle that I've drawn, and then I will use my liner brush to go over the diagonal lines again. I've switched back to a 12mm brush for this now, which is what I use for most of my nail art. And back to the longer liner brush for the lines. So recommend bracing your pinky against your hand like I'm doing here. This also further helps stabilize everything and just make sure that your hands are not not so shaky when you're doing your nail art. I'm also going to be using a little bit of orange to add some shading to the sun, so I'm using our October Breeze gel. A little bit goes a long way just to add some warmth and dimension there. For shading, I do switch over to a 5mm brush. Since it is shorter and more dense, it makes it easier to do a feathering motion. I'm taking a little bit of golden hour again and just using that over the sun, over the shading that we've already done, and then I'm also going to use that over the diagonal lines. By the way, you could also do this design over the entire nail. You don't have to do a French tip. You could just polish over the entire nail, but I think it's nice to let a little bit of the base color show. Now I'm just finishing off with that neon yellow, but this I'm not really using for shading. I'm actually using this to outline the sun, and then I'm just using this over the diagonal lines that we've already drawn. And we just finished off with our top coat, and this is how this nail turned out. Very fun and bright, and I love how it uses a lot of the same colors that we've already used throughout this set. Continuing with the horizontal French tips, but this time I will be going back to using the technique of the white base before applying my actual base color. I am using our art gel brush to polish that. Makes it super easy curing that, and then I'm applying this neon yellow color. Very, very bright. This is probably the brightest color I'm using in this entire set. I really love it. It's like a true highlighter color, and then I am going to do a bright green aura over that. Since we're doing a darker color for the aura, we don't need to add a white base, and it blends nicely over that. And then I'm going to top coat with a matte top coat and then buff that out since we are doing chrome isolation. I use the Goy matte top coat, and I think it works really nicely even without buffing, but I just do that as a safe measure. And then I'm trying to match the chrome powder colors that I'll be using. I ended up going with this cooler toned gold, and now I'm just getting my mixture ready. So I'm taking a non-wipe rhinestone glue and then mixing a little bit of black gel polish with that. If you feel like that's too thick, you can add in a non-wipe top coat, but the key is to use something that's non-wipe, and then using the black with it just helps ensure your chrome powder comes out a little bit more opaque, or just turns out better, the color shows up better. But you just want to use some sort of non-wipe mixture for the chrome isolation. Some people like to use like a pre-made gel that's designed for this. I just mix whatever mixture I can with the products that I have. I drew a couple of stars, and I'm starting with the green chrome powder, and I'm just rubbing that in after curing the gel for about 20 to 30 seconds and then curing again. And since I am using two different chrome powder colors, I'm doing everything separately. So these little dots here I ended up doing separately with the same mixture, curing them for about 20 to 30 seconds, then applying the gold chrome. Ended up wanting to add more, so you can definitely kind of piecemeal the different designs you're doing or do different chrome powder colors that way. As long as everything is buffed out and everything isolates the way it's supposed to, you should have no issues, and the sponge cleans up everything nicely so the colors don't bleed together. And for the final nail, I am using our October Breeze gel to draw the last French tip, and I'm going to fully cure that, and then I'm going to do a little bit of a white aura over that before I do a yellow aura on top. Only thing about these brushes is sometimes they can get a little linty, as you're seeing here, so you want to clean them off with some tape, but it's not too bad once you add your top coat. And then I just added golden hour over that with our art glass gel, and then the inspo for this nail is a little bit of a soccer net design, but a little bit more editorial and artsy, so I'm just doing these wavy lines as a grid pattern. You just want to draw the lines going the opposite way, and then I am taking some 3D gel, and this is supposed to be kind of a soccer ball, but I am going to actually draw the Brazil flag on it. So yeah, kind of the idea of a soccer ball in the net, but a little bit more artsy and in line with the theme. I didn't want it to be so literal, I guess, so I'm using a pretty classic color green for the base, and then I added neon yellow on top of that to add some dimension, and I've already cured the 3D gel, by the way. This is how I like to incorporate 3D elements throughout my sets, sometimes just subtle hints and nods to 3D elements versus sculpting everything. Now we're drawing the base of the center of the flag. I ended up doing that with a white base and then doing the yellow on top of that with the same technique that we've been following, and then you want to cure between each layer as well. I did a white circle before adding the dark blue center. This is very small, so I didn't obviously add like the entire details that you see on the flag with like the stars and the lettering, but I wanted to add some rhinestones just to add a fun touch. To add this at the different intersecting points of the soccer net, I thought it would add a fun 3D touch without me sculpting anything, and it's a fun way to add some charms. If you consider rhinestones a sort of charm, but it's really easy to do once you have placed down the rhinestone glue. You just place them at the different points, and then I went ahead and top coated the 3D portion separately and then the rest of the nail. Here's the full set, how how it turned out on this hand, and it is very bright, very on brand for summer, and it's very sad that Brazil was eliminated, but these were really fun to wear for the beginning of the tournament throughout the first couple of weeks. If you're going on vacation, or you're visiting Brazil, or you're just looking for summer vacation nails in general, I think these are a really fun set to do, especially with the different colors. It doesn't feel so literal like soccer, but it has the different elements. In addition to the products that I have for my brand on my site, you can also shop this set as a press-on set that would be made custom to you, made with gel products. I have other designs listed on there as well, so you can check that out in the description. And thank you so much for watching. See you in my next video.